Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Kim, what's your view of this? Is there some agenda item, some negotiating point that Republicans in the House can agree on here? Or what does it do to Kevin McCarthy's speakership if he finds himself in a position where Democratic votes are what it takes to get the debt ceiling raised?
This is a problem, as Kate was just pointing out, is that Republicans can't agree on an ask. And the big issue here is the part of the caucus that is demanding sweeping spending change in exchange for raising the debt ceiling. And I don't think anybody has really thought through, at least not the public, what that would entail. When you hear these Republicans saying, we want to balance the budget in 10 years, that sounds really great. And I think a lot of people in the public think, oh, well, we can do that just by getting rid of some waste or some unpopular programs. No, 6 programs alone make up 75% of federal spending, okay? Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, defense, veterans spending, and interest payments. And by the way, those interest payments are growing rapidly as interest rates rise. So if you want to balance the budget over the next decade, you have to cut $12 trillion out of it, all right? That's an enormous amount of money. And if you want to preserve those 6 very important and popular programs, you end up having to cut to get to a balanced budget food stamps, infrastructure, highway aid, U.S. embassies, all the maintenance for our national parks, NASA, unemployment benefits, disaster aid. I mean, you basically get rid of pretty much everything else in government. And that is simply not tenable for most Americans out there. And Republicans aren't going to go through with it. And the issue for Republicans is that unlike Democrats, they have no patience. They always want it to come all at once, quickly, and unrealistically. And as a result, they almost always fail. So I think the guidance here is that they need to be asking, as Kate said, for something that is more realistic, something that essentially freezes some discretionary accounts and propose some modest entitlement savings to lay the groundwork to build on some more. This would be the best approach. But if they can't decide to come around that, then yes, we are in a situation where they're just going to get hammered and where McCarthy, out of desperation, might have to then turn to Democrats. And then, hey, presto, we get to have the first experience with how that motion to vacate the chair rules that we've been talking about kicks in when some of his Republicans object to that and try to remove him from Speaker.
I agree with Kim here. I was looking at an analysis by Douglas Holtz-Eakin. He's an economist, former director of the Congressional Budget Office. And as he runs the numbers, in order to balance the budget in 10 years, that would mean an overall cut in spending or planned spending of 17%. And if that is shared across all programs in a sort of an equal way, you're talking about $7.2 trillion out of mandatory spending in 10 years. That would be $2.9 trillion out of Social Security, $2.6 trillion out of Medicare reimbursements, and $1 trillion out of Medicaid. And there's no possible world, I think, where Republican House candidates are going to go back to their districts and run on that kind of agenda in the next election. And so I keep thinking about the old phrase attributed to Mario Cuomo that you govern in prose and you campaign in poetry. And we need a transition here. That's not to say that there is not opportunities for spending restraint, but it is not going to look like a bumper sticker that says balance the budget in 10 years. There's another budget analyst I was reading who says that if you can cut the growth of discretionary spending, the annual growth of discretionary spending by 1 percentage point, that comes out to about $1 trillion over a decade. And that would be a huge victory in terms of spending cuts, but it is not the kind of thing that ends up on a bumper sticker or that you campaign on. And I think what we need is some of these Republicans who really want spending restraint and who campaigned on things like balancing the budget to go look at these numbers and find something that is achievable, that they can go back to their district and sell that this is a victory, even if it is a cut in the growth of discretionary spending. especially when you have these huge inflation figures. If you can cut the growth of discretionary spending, you can have a real win. The other dynamic here, Kate, that I don't want to leave out is that we're talking about discretionary spending. Some of that is military spending. And we're also in an era where there's renewed great power competition, and I think an appetite among many members of the Republican Party to increase military spending. And if you're going to do that in order to give the US and its allies the tools to counter Russia and China and have the aid that we need to help protect Ukraine, help protect Taiwan, that would mean if the discretionary budget is going down, that would mean an even larger cut in the non defense portion of that.
Yeah, Kyle, and I think that's one reason why, while I admire the goals of balanced budget movements, it does sort of presuppose that all spending is equal, and it isn't. Some spending that we do in the discretionary budget is a core purpose of government, like defending the nation, and others is more peripheral and bloated or has grown more significantly over time. So I think here, what Republicans need to do is not try to use these percentage-based hammers and instead use their committee positions and the budget process to dig into these budgets for each of the dozen appropriation bills and do an education campaign with the public about how much money have we spent on this particular program over a period of time and what have we used it for? Is it too much? Because I don't think it will win over the public to just argue for these percentage-based cuts. And also, you could balance the budget by raising taxes, and there would be a lot of good reasons not to do that, especially one being that it would hurt the economy. So a balanced budget is not necessarily, I think, the right guide. I think it is worth looking under the hood of each of these programs to identify what we're actually doing with this money. I mean, we have spent so much money over COVID emergencies, and some of it has gone out to the door to states. We don't even have a basic accounting of where some of this money has ended up. There are rich opportunities here to control spending, but have to be more substantive than some of what we're talking about, which are really just show votes to take back to your district and say, I'm fiscally a serious guy, even if you haven't accomplished anything on the budget.
Thank you, Kate and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.